This is the best model that Rapido has released to date. This really is a lovely model. It performed much better than any of the competition with this wheel arrangement has managed in the past. Hi there, it is really great to see you. I do hope you're well. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you up here to Weir Yard, where today we're going to be taking a good long look at the all-new tooled Rapido Trains Metropolitan E-Class locomotive, better known as Metropolitan number 1, after the survivor that really has led quite an interesting life. The real locomotives were built way back in the 19th century, and Metropolitan number 1 was a bit of an outlier because officially she was assembled from parts as an accountancy rebuild of an earlier locomotive, although I suspect that that was purely an accountancy trick and she probably didn't have very much at all from that earlier locomotive that she effectively replaced. The class was very successful, running trains on the Metropolitan Railway right through into the new ownership of London Transport, and she would have gone the way of her sisters if it wasn't for the fact that the locomotive that the person who eventually bought her was actually wanting to buy turned out on inspection to have a terminally cracked frame. And that put Metropolitan number 1 firmly in the frame, and it's a good job too because the locomotive survives to the present day and has run repeatedly in preservation. It's also meant that Rapido has the real thing to go off to measure up and bring us this model, and I'd like to thank Rapido Trains for very kindly sending one over so that we can have this good close look. But before we get into the video, I'd like to ask a huge favour. Do hit that like button if you like what you see, and also consider subscribing to the channel, and it's a great way of supporting us and also getting to know about new videos as and when they go up. And you can also find us over on Patreon. Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. But without further ado, let's take a good close look at the latest model to come through from Rapido Trains. And I know it's become quite a common theme that nearly every other week there seems to be a new tooled product from Rapido, but this certainly promises to be, on paper, something really special. So let's take a close look and see if it lives up to expectations. The new releases from Rapido Trains continue with the Metropolitan Railway number 1. This was the E-Class locomotive, of which they actually had a number originally built, but number 1 is quite peculiar in that it was assembled from spare parts left over after the building of the first two, and technically on paper it was an accountancy rebuild of an A-class that was destroyed in an accident beforehand. Although, in all honesty, these were often accountancy rebuilds, and there's probably a token piece of the original locomotive somewhere in the construction, but the rest of the parts were new. So as a small class of locomotives, these were pivotal in running services on the Metropolitan Railway, which is now part of London Underground, and hence this is a Transport for London official licensed product. Number 1 does actually survive, and it's quite convoluted how it managed to do so. Quite a famous locomotive in that it ran the last steam services on the Metropolitan Railway back in, I think it was 1961, and then took part in a celebration of the Metropolitan Railway a couple of years later. And it might not have survived and gone the way of its sister locomotives in being scrapped if it wasn't for a peculiar quirk of fate, whereby a young fitter at the London Transport Workshops saved up the money to save actually a different member of the fleet, which was the F-Class 062 tank locomotive. But unfortunately, even though he did manage to raise £1,000, which covered the £500 asking price plus presumably other money towards restoration and transport costs, that turned out on inspection to have a cracked frame, which would have rendered it inoperable. And so London Underground offered this locomotive for the price of £450. So it owes its continued existence really to another locomotive having been in worse condition than expected. Looking at the box, it's the standard Rapido box. Always good and solid. I do like these boxes. They protect your locomotive in transit and in storage as well. Now, there are a number of different versions that are being offered by Rapido, and this particular one that they've kindly sent for review is Metropolitan Railway E-Class in the Metropolitan livery as per running in preservation between 1999 and 2009. And this is the non-DCC sound version, catalogue number 909003. Now, they are doing factory-fitted sound versions of all of the different liveries. In terms of other versions available, we have this in its London Transport livery as L44, and also a sister locomotive number L48, which, whilst there was a lot of detail differences between different members of the class, Rapido believed that L48 was close enough that they could offer her as well. She was originally Metropolitan number 81. And they're also offering in the later preserved livery from 2013 to 2020. Inside the box, I'm just going to slide this open. It's a good substantial box. First thing that meets us is this really quite comprehensive booklet. And I must admit, some really, really high production values gone into this. Got a little bit of history on the locomotive, servicing, running in, and also some information on DCC Fitting. Now, later on in the video, I am going to be showing you how to fit your own decoder into these, and I'm going to be using the Trainomatic Next 18 decoder. It's actually really nice and comprehensive, which is always good. Sometimes you get some fairly vague instructions, and then we've also got the full listing of what the functions do on the factory fitted sound, some additional information on the optional fitted parts, and I think as well we've also got the important information that shows you where they go. And it's little things like this is really, really useful, because I've seen so many models where you get the pack of detailed parts, but it doesn't tell you where they're supposed to go. And this does come with a lifetime limited warranty. So all that information is in the booklet. And inside we've got the foam packaging protecting the locomotive in its clamshell. Now, there is an additional bag here. This is those extra detailed parts, all ready finished in multiple colours, some of them. So the vacuum standards there, we've got the red and the black. And just sometimes it's the little things. This comes in a resealable bag so that you can actually fit some but not all, but then not have to worry about the rest of them ending up just either getting lost or getting loose inside the packaging, which is, like I said, it's a little thing, but it really is quite helpful. Getting the locomotive out, first impressions are this is a really sharp livery application. We've got the Metropolitan Railway maroon. The lining is really quite nice and crisp. You can see there the parallel yellow with the black in between has been really nicely applied, straight and true. We've got no squiffiness on any of that, and that extends to the splashes at the front, the steps. There's a lot that goes into these sort of liveries, and it really is nice to see. Now, the dome on top is finished in this kind of brass colour, and we've seen from various manufacturers a mirror finish on these as well as this kind of paint finish version. My personal preference is for this painted version. Now, anybody who's been around real steam locomotive knows that highly polished brass doesn't stay that way for very long when it's heated up and when it's subjected to things like steam playing over it, it does dull down very, very quickly. And also a mirror finish would have been very distracting for the crew, because there would have been quite a bright reflection off this in sunlight. So I actually prefer that version. Front face of the locomotive captured really well. We've got the cutouts in the front buffer beam, and most of the front buffer beam detail there is factory fitted, although we do have the gaping hole for the coupling. And I must admit, my preference on these is to actually just have the hook but not the chain, so you can still use the slimline tension locks but not have that hole in the buffer beam. Now you can cut down the ones that come in the detail bag and fit those, but just as one small point, I think it's probably better for the vast majority of users that it comes with a hook of some sort already factory finished. The rest of the model, we've got the funnel here, really quite nice flared top. You can see there it's a complex shape, and the saddle that it sits on too is fitted really quite snugly into place. We've got no unsightly gaps. Underneath the dome, there is a little bit of a gap on this side. It's quite hard to tell. You have to go looking for it, but it does seem to be flush on this side. It's hard to tell because of all of this extra pipe work that runs along the side. These are actually made from, it feels like plastic, but it's a fairly springy plastic, and it does seem fairly robust. It's not cracking apart under handling. We've got an additional level of extra fitted parts up here on the top of the tanks. The water filler caps are separately applied detail, really quite fine, including the screws which hold them firmly shut at the front. We've also got a bracket up here, in fact 2 brackets. These would be for things like carrying fire rakes and fire irons for dealing with the fire. Just obviously there's nowhere else to put them on a tender locomotive. They tended to be carried in the tender, but there's no option for that with a tank locomotive. It carries an 044 wheel arrangement, and this is the quintessential Victorian tank locomotive, where you've got the driving wheels right up here at the front. On the real locomotive, the weight distribution would be such there'd be a lot of weight over that. And it's got the trailing bogie here for carrying the weight of the bunker and the cab, otherwise you would have had quite a huge overhang. This bogie is sprung. There's a pleasing amount of spring there. It's not excessive, so I think it's been well balanced so that when the locomotive is on track, it's not trying to lift this rear set of driving wheels, so adding to the adhesive weight. Underneath the boiler, we've got, you can just see in there, some extra detail parts for the motion. They really are nice, picked out in that red. We've got fully sprung metal turned buffer heads, and the aforementioned tension lock coupling fits into a little NEM pocket there at the front. Now, whilst as it is, obviously you're going to need that for pulling trains for the vast majority of people, some people might find that a bit distracting, and it does come out really, really easily. And as you can see, the actual mounting socket up there is very, very unobtrusive in between these guard irons. These are actually metal parts by the feel of it, pretty robust. We've got sanding pipes. We've also got the brake blocks there. The actual brake blocks themselves seem to be very, very thin. You can just see them very close to the wheel treads. Underneath, we've got factory fitted brake rigging throughout. And you can also see the holes here for the factory pre-fitted speaker. So this does come with a speaker, whether it comes with the factory fitted sound option or not, which does mean that if you want to fit your own sound profile in here on an X18 decoder, you just need the decoder. You don't have to worry about fitting a speaker. That's all taken care of in an enclosure for you. The pickups are via wipers which play on the back of all of the wheels on this locomotive, and what is quite pleasing is that they do come from the factory with them perfectly adjusted, so there's no need to go in there and do anything yourself. They do continue to make contact with the full sideways travel of not just the driving wheels but also those on the bogie too. Looking into the cab, we've got another huge amount of detail. Doesn't appear to have a removable cab roof. A little bit of a shame. It's going to be a bit difficult getting in there to not just admire that backhead detail, and there is a lot of it, although you can see that reasonably well through the sides. We've also got quite a flat bunker front in there as well, and I do like the maroon goes up to a certain point, and then we've got this cream colour underneath the roof and the front of the cab, with the back head of the boiler picked out in black with brass and red fittings separately applied. And you can even see the gauges, they're printed with the needles and the markings too. It's got flush glazing, and just right up at the top in there are two. There's more gauges. I think they might actually be decorated onto the glazing bar. It's kind of hard to see, but that is a really good effect. There doesn't appear to be any visible means of the glazing being in there, which is good. You don't want to be distracted by a piece of ugly clear plastic. And we've got some really nice rivet detail along the tank sides here, with Metropolitan Railway following the line of the rivets, not distorted at all by their presence. And then the Metropolitan Railway crest. That is really slickly done. You could imagine this would be quite an intense livery to finish at the factory, but they've done a really good job. There's actually a lot of weight on this, and when I'm weighing it up in my hands, it does feel like there's a good amount of that weight is directed into this four-coupled set of driving wheels. They are metal. The profile on there is really nice with the spokes. You can see some of the finish too on the chassis just through those spokes. It's not just a black blob, we've got additional maroon in there, and I do love this lining too on the wheels, and we've got no variance in that, so we're not going to get a kind of hypnotic effect as they go round. We've got plain, as per the prototype, connecting rods, and these are held in by hex nuts, which are chemically blackened, as is the connecting rods. Sandpipes and boxes, these feel very substantial. There's no risk of them breaking away. I've had that with other locomotives, and it is a real nuisance when these come loose, but no problems with that. Looking to the back of the bunker, again, lining continues, straight and true, sprung buffers. Again, we've got that hole in the buffer beam where the coupling drawbar would go. It would be, in my opinion, better served by having just the hook already in place, but that's my opinion. And then we've got separately fitted metal lamp irons. And looking to the top there, the representation of the coal. It's actually a really good moulding of coal. I've seen some really dire ones in my time, but this is not one of them. That is really well done. And the back windows on the cab, you can see there, very distinctive shape, with the edging picked out in the brass colour and those very, very fine bars over the top. This really is a lovely model. The rear bogie, you can see, has got quite a degree of lateral movement available to it, and we've got full pickups as well. By the look of it, you can just see the unobtrusive wires heading back into the rest of the chassis, which does mean that hopefully we are picking up off all 8 wheels. And then we've got the rear coupling fits into the NEM pocket just at the back here between the, again, really quite robust guard irons and the lining on those wheels too. Quite large pony wheels, but really, really well realised. The steps themselves are metal and good and substantial. There doesn't feel like there's any risk of these being broken off. And again, that's been a bugbear with other manufacturers' models, that the steps tend to be quite flimsy, but not so on this model from Rapido. When it comes to running on DC, the model out of the box performed really well on my rolling road, and you can see that the firebox flicker lights up with the power even down to quite a low level. It was pretty smooth in both directions, and certainly Rapido does recommend an element of running in to get maximum performance from the model and to quieten down any gear noise that might be present. Although it did seem incredibly smooth on this model out of the box, certainly it only got smoother as I ran it. So I'm going to come now to the DCC fitting, and we'll also take a look at the motor and the chassis and the space available as I do that. For the DCC fitting, I'm going to be using the Trainer-Matic Next 18 decoder. It's got a really nice small form factor and it promises to be an easy fit into this model. I'm also going to look into just how well the all-new Trainer-Matic Smart Power Pack works as well, about fitting this into the model. This is an all-new product which promises much easier fitment into a variety of smaller models, and I've got this pre-soldered to one of the Next 18 decoders. You can see there it's just careful soldering to the outer two pads, taking note of the polarity there, black to the bottom, red to the middle of the decoder, to be able to get this to work. Getting into the model is nice and straightforward. We're going to be using the jeweler's screwdrivers. So first of all, we're going to go and remove that front coupling, and that reveals tiny little screw up here at the front. Be really careful not to strip that thread. Believe me, if you force it, it will strip the thread and then you'll have great difficulty getting the chassis and the body to sit properly. And then we've got these two other screws at the back, one either side of the bogie, and just keep these safely to one side. You can see the two that are the same are for the back and the small one is for the front. And then with a little bit of a wiggle, it actually does come out really quite well. Looking inside there, you can see there's a lot of die-cast metal, giving plenty of weight into this, and it does also seem that the back head is part of that all metal casting. There's a lot of space here as well in the side tanks, so you can see that you could actually put a really quite large Stay Alive into this space with greatest of ease. And also if you wanted a larger speaker with a sound installation, there really is a huge amount of room inside there, which is great to see. The chassis itself, well, we're just taking a look at this. We've got the motor mounted just above the base of the boiler, and I wasn't aware of any parting lines off this, so it's really well done. You can see it's already lined too, and then we've got the representation of that motion now much clearer to be able to see with the body off. There's a huge amount of die cast in here. There's still a lot of weight despite the fact that quite a bit of die cast has gone in the body, and the Next 18 socket is just here on top of the circuit board, and the firebox flicker is attached just here at the back. With a speaker, it appears pre-fitted into an enclosure underneath. Just going to take off that Next 18 blanking plate. It's really quite easy to do. And I'm just going to do a test fit here with the smart power bank from Trainer-Matic, just to see how well this fits. But quite frankly, I can imagine that there is enough space in here to be able to put the largest of power banks if you want to marvel at just how far you can make your locomotive go off the juice. Just make sure that that is fitted parallel to the circuit board. You can see it's actually dwarfed in that space. There is plenty of space in there, and that entire vertical height is available for use, as well as the space in those tanks. So I can see that there's going to be no issues whatsoever fitting this in, and it does make me think that actually I could go for a much bigger smart power bank in this locomotive with no issues on space at all. I'm just going to protect that with some Captain tape, and then I'm going to tuck them out of the way just on top of the decoder area, or alternatively down into those tank sides. It really is whatever personal preference. Control board sits nicely on top, and then quite honestly I think there's plenty of space to put the capacitors just down into the tank, and then very, very gently get the body back down. And it's not even tight, it's not even difficult to line everything up. Let's get those screws in. The best sign to tell you that you've got this seated correctly with no trapped wires is that once you put the screws in at the back, then that front screw should be fairly simple to go in. You don't need to force it. If you're finding that the chassis is sitting proud, and that means that something is trapped. Don't try and squash it in with the screw or you will strip the thread. And then we just put the front coupling back in, and then it's off to the programming track to put in whatever DCC address suits you for this locomotive. I'm going to use number 1. It's a pretty obvious one to go for, but you can use any other that you have that fits in with your locomotive fleet. When it comes to running here on Weir Yard, the model did perform really well out of the box. With the standard decoder in, it did seem to not be phased by anything like the insul frog points or the double slips, or in fact any of the other slightly dubiously laid track work. It took in 5% gradients with a very short train, and later on I had it opened up on the main line where it was able to haul 6 coaches on the level with relative ease, but the slight gradients did start to put a crimp on haulage capacity, and I ended up down to 4 coaches to just about manage to get it to keep going round. There was a small issue with the bogie on the back, with the wheels kind of sliding from time to time rather than rolling, and I tracked this down to the retaining screw being a little bit on the tight side. I unscrewed this back a couple of turns and these issues just disappeared, and this might be something for future production runs for Rapido to perhaps consider a slightly elongated screw, maybe add a washer in just to give it a little bit more vertical distance. But this is only a minor gripe and was relatively easily fixed just with a few seconds and a flathead screwdriver. All in all, the performance was really good. When I tried it with the Micro Smart Power Pack from Trainomatic, performance really was second to none. You could get it to just crawl over uneven track and insul frog points, and it just wasn't phased in the slightest. So we turn now to the scores. And first up is build quality, and this is actually really good. There's nothing that came apart whilst I was handling it, and I'm really quite impressed as well. These steps really are quite robust. Pipework too is done out of a kind of springy plastic, it feels like, and is quite robust, and even the additionally fitted parts like the smokebox dart has withstood all of the handling as I've been going through the review. The only areas where I might have a few small issues was with the fit of the screw on the rear bogie. It was only a tiny issue, but I'm just going to highlight it. But everything else seemed pretty good, so I'm going to give it a 9.5. On running quality, well, these 044 locomotives are notoriously difficult to get balanced and operable in 00 gauge, and certainly none of the ones from other manufacturers have really lit up the sky in terms of their pulling performance. The Metropolitan E-Class did really well in this area, taking in the 5% gradient on the torture test track plus the radius 1 curves, and a mix of electrofrog and insul frog points without too many issues, and certainly it performed much better than any of the competition with this wheel arrangement has managed in the past. It was still just a little bit hampered on the main line, and whilst it could handle the 6-coach train on the level with remarkable ease, it didn't take much of a gradient to bring it to a stall. It was equally a good performer in both directions. I did put this to the test, and I would say it is marginally better running forwards than backwards in terms of grip, but there's not really a lot in it. These 044 tanks would have been equally at home in real life running in either direction, so it is an important consideration. With a 4-coach train, it did manage to get round all of Weir Yard. There was no issues whatsoever on the point work, any of the twists and turns, and overall I thought it did really quite well. Again, the only area for concern was these rear bogie wheels just skidding on the track, and I could only fix that by slackening off the nut. And we've already really mentioned that, but certainly it's an area that I think that Rapido might like to look into for future releases. I'm going to give it an 8.9. On DCC Fitting and Innovation, well, there is tons of room inside this model. I don't think there's anything in particular that's going to be an issue to fit in here, and that Trainomatic Next 18 decoder looked positively tiny inside the space that was available. With a pre-fitted factory speaker, it does mean that you just don't have to worry about sound installation, and as I proved with the Trainomatic Micro Smart Power Pack, there's no issue getting that in, and there's room for even the largest of Stay Alives or power banks or power packs. It's just got as much room as you're likely to ever need. The Firebox flicker works on F3 and F4 on the Trainomatic decoder, giving you a combination of yellow and red LEDs, and certainly this is a nice touch that we're seeing on quite a few of the steam locomotives going forward, and it's nice to see that more is being made of DCC functionality. There's nothing really to detract on this model, and it's great to see what Rapido have achieved, so I'm going to give it the full 10 out of 10. On accuracy and quality of finish, well, both of these do seem to be very well done. I couldn't see any issues that struck out for me in terms of the accuracy, and the quality of this finish really is superb. The lining is straight and true and crisp, and even down to that Metropolitan Railway crest, the detail on there is superb. Inside the cab, we've got a lot of detail, even where you might not necessarily be able to see it. And the lining on the wheels was absolutely perfect, so that when it ran, this was quite smooth and you didn't get a wobble effect, which is a way that unfortunately I have seen on other models. The lining on wheels can actually become a detraction rather than an asset. All in all, there really wasn't anything to fault, and I'm going to give this another 10 out of 10. On value for money, these models can be found at an RRP of £179.95, or for the factory sound-fitted examples for £279.95, and that applies to all the different versions. From retailers, you will get a discount, and we do have an affiliate link down below to take you to where you can buy the full range of these models. It did seem to be a little bit at the higher end of what you would expect for a 044 tank locomotive, but that does seem to be the way that prices are going, and you do get an awful lot for your money. I'm going to give this an 8.0, giving us a final score of 46.4. It's a great score for what is a great offering, and certainly, in my opinion, this is the best model that Rapido has released to date, and I'm really looking forward to the next one, as I'm sure that they will just get better and better. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that good close look at the Metropolitan E-Class in the form of Metropolitan number 1. Certainly for me, there's some really great decoration on this model. The printing is absolute micron perfect, and the running qualities of this were really silky smooth. Even though Rapido say you need to run it in, actually I think that's a bit belt and braces, because this example was absolutely perfect out of the box and only got better the more we ran it. There was that one little snag with the bogie wheels just seeming to slide a bit, but that was easy to fix, and I'm sure that that's something that Rapido will address in subsequent production runs of this model. And for the end user, it's actually really easy. Just a flathead screwdriver, a couple of turns, and you're good to go. Inside the model, it actually blew me away that they've included so much space to get extra speakers in, although you probably won't need to if you go for a sound option, because there is a pre-fitted speaker. But inside those tanks you could fit something like a mega bass speaker, and certainly a very, very large smart power bank. And the actual footprint where the Next 18 socket is such that even the largest of DCC decoders is not really going to have an issue fitting itself into there. We've got the firebox flicker as standard, and it's always good to see, and the cab detail I thought was particularly good. Even though without a removable roof, it's sometimes a little bit difficult just to enjoy the amount of detail that's actually there. All in all, this was a great model from Rapido Trains, and I'd go as far as to say that so far this is probably the best of all the models that they've done. And that's quite a bar to achieve, because some of the previous ones, like the 15XX, have been incredibly good as well. So I'm really looking forward to see what they've got cooking for the next release. But I'd love to hear from you, just what you think about this model. Don't forget, we've got an affiliate link down below to take you to where you can pick this model up for what we believe to be the keenest possible price. But do hurry, it's sure to sell through pretty quickly, and you get a choice of DCC ready or DCC sound fitted. And certainly, yeah, DC modelers shouldn't be too worried, because as we showed in this video, Firebox Flicker works just fine on DC current as well. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think about this model down in the comments? Let me know. Is this something maybe you've been looking forward to? Have you got one on pre-order, or indeed have you already received yours? I'd love to hear from you, your feedback and experiences of how well this model runs on your layout, and it's a great way of sharing your experiences with your fellow modeler. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying don't forget to hit that like button, share the video to social media, and subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. And you can also head on over to Patreon or check out our full merch store. Until then, you take great care. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for finding all of the models featured today at the best possible price at the link in the description. TMC also offers custom weathering and renumbering to any model, be it brand new or pre-owned. Check out their full pre-owned listings too, where you can be assured of quality, as every item is screened and graded by professional staff. TMC, the Model Centre, your first choice for all aspects of modelling. I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.